part of this safety depth chart, the younger guys on this depth chart, guys like Deshaun McBride, who are coming in, Joel Rogers, who's coming in, Kylan Jackson, who's in after a redshirt season and now going into his second season in the program. You've got a transfer in Austin Alsbury, who's only been in college football for a short time. So you've got some new faces back there that, you really, I think the veterans give you the peace of mind. Major Burns, Sage Ryan, Jordan Gilbert, of guys that have the experience, that have played. But really, when you look at this overall group, I imagine that Deshaun McBride is going to be on the field pretty quick. If not as an every down guy, by at least having some packages out there and having him available to play. What I love about McBride and what the return has been back from on McBride is that you've got another solid tackler. And more than anything, the improvement that I hope to see in year one under Blake Baker and his defensive staff is that they improve on tackling, right? I think there's a lot of things when you look at Matt House's defense over the last couple of years that stand out and should be easy fixes for Blake Baker, right? I mean, you go back and watch some of the games from even 2 years ago, but especially last season, more people did not know what they were supposed to be doing or where they were supposed to be than is explainable really from House and his staff. I think that stuff's going to be taken care of. I think that guys are going to be in the right position. I think guys are going to be put in roles and places to make plays, and I think they'll put the right guys in the position and put them out there. Now, the coaches can't go make form tackles, but they can take this time, spring, off-season, football school, which they're allotted, I believe it's like 8 hours a week. They can sit in a classroom with these guys and talk football. And one of the big emphases I hope they make early on here in the defensive side is tackling. And tackling to me is something that, all of us watch a ton of football, right? Whether it's Friday night on high school fields, Saturday with college, or NFL Sundays. And one habitual problem that has been constant over the last, let's call it 5 to 7 years, with the transition of the rules, with the new CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, which really, dictates how much time you can spend on the practice field, how much time you can spend in pads, how much time you can spend hitting. All of that is really trickled down from the top onto college and high school fields. And rarely do you find a team. That's why, in watching Dan Campbell's Detroit Lions last year on Hard Knocks, I mean, he really had to sell to his team the benefits on tackling within training camp. I mean, you could tell it was a fragile, it was a gentle, it was a ease of approach on a conversation that he knew his team was not going to take well. And think about it. You're asking football players to tackle.
It's going to suck, man.
It'd be like asking an accountant to fill out a spreadsheet. Buddy, you're going to have to do this.
It's not tax season yet, but yeah.
It's a part of the job, right? I know that the physicality and the emphasis on the safety of the game has been prioritized now in football, but still at the end of it, you still got to hit. You know what I mean? You still got to take somebody down to the ground, and that has been really the skill, I don't even know if it's a skill, I guess the
mentality.
The learned trade of football that has suffered the most because you don't practice it like you did. Definitely 10, 15 years ago, right?
We were talking about Curly Hallman
yesterday. The guy was doing 3-a-days in August, all full pads. There was, not so long ago, Leonard Fournette and LSU were suited up in full gear on a Wednesday practice going into the Wisconsin game where Fournette sprains his ankle because they're going full contact. They're hitting on a Wednesday of game week. You try that stuff now, and people will quit. People will transfer. They'll be out. Legitimately. When you're just asking football players to tackle. But I hope that the biggest improvement, and I think it can come from the safety spot. I watched Kylan Jackson play a lot of football in high school. You know, one of the things that you saw in the spot time that he played last season was that he's physical. Like, he's going to come up and hit you. And he's going to do it more reckless than he does safe. You know, in today's age of a football player, he's probably still more reckless than he is
refined.
Right, plays with the safety of the game at the front of his brain, you know, the front of his mind. So, you know, I think some guys out there that, you know, you'll roll out there, I think are just better tacklers by the way that they play. I've heard really good things about Deshaun McBride as a tackler. I know Kylan Jackson is a guy who likes to hit. I think Harold Perkins is probably one of the best tacklers in the league. You know, I mean, he's a guy, if he gets his hands on you, you're usually going down to the ground.
Weeks.
They've got to have some more guy, absolutely. Whit Weeks is someone who showed that, I mean, he's as good a tackler as LSU has. Greg Penn is somebody who can make tackles. And then, you know, the infusion of these younger guys. The pictures of Ahmad Bro, who's come out over the last couple of days, to me is, you know, I mean, you want to find some hype. You want to find something to talk about in late June going into July where there's nothing happening on the field. There's nothing happening in competition. There's nothing going on that we can tangibly talk about. So we'll break down their Instagram pictures. I mean, like, you know, I mean, I don't know what else to give you. I mean, this is not what Ahmad Bro looked like at the state championship game 7 months ago, 8 months ago. I mean, like that's a totally refined player physically. You know, you still got to jump that mountain and jump that hurdle from a mental standpoint, and that's probably tougher, and not probably, that most definitely is a harder test to pass than the physical one. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that it's easy, but you've got the weight room at your, you know, exposure. You're on a schedule. You're in with your freshman class. I mean, everybody's going to show up and do their work. Bro looks like he's put in more work than others because of the transformation of his body. Now you just hope he can take that mental leap on making the transition of high school to college football. You know, I mean, whether it's 5A in one of the most gifted and talented states that plays high school football in the country or not, the transition from high school to the SEC is real. And it's especially real in the trenches, in and on the line of scrimmage. So, you know,
would you say probably the toughest position to be a freshman? As if you're going to get playing time, obviously I would think like quarterback, corner, but to make that transition from high school defensive lineman to college defensive tackle, where he had to put on, I mean, they said he's up to 285 now. And Ahmad Bro, he's probably looking around going, who else is going to do it? Like, there's an opportunity for me to get on the field early, so I'll do whatever they need me to do in terms of putting on weight. But
I don't think Bro came in to play interior.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like that transition has got to be one of the like the harder ones. But whenever you look around the room, you're going, who else is going to do it? Like, you need depth at that spot. And if you're Ahmad Bro, like, good on you for being like, all right, I'll do it. If this gets me on the field, I'll go up to 285.
He played interior at Ruston.
Without question, huh?
He played defensive tackle at Ruston.
He did, but I mean, I think they signed him at the expectation that he was going to be a stand-up guy. I mean, he was even a little undersized.
Yeah, he's like a tweener.
He was a tweener.
You either put weight on him,
right?
And put him inside, or
you trim him down and make him an edge speed guy.
I mean, and they're probably having the same conversation. But didn't Relaford play inside too?
Relaford played
like
a
he
lot
moved
more
around
edge.
A lot. Yeah.
Relaford's more of an edge guy.
Yeah.
I just think people, whenever he got signed, were expecting like, oh, maybe you can move him inside, but he is not. Like he's an edge.
He's an edge.
He's quick.
I would think Don McKinley.
Yes.
Ahmad Bro.
Gio Paez.
Savion Jones.
Dylan Carpenter
and Paris Shand.
Yeah, Shand is the one.
Would be the like the top 4 candidates of guys that weren't here last year. Or I guess, you know, or weren't around the position last year, not interior defensive linemen. Shan and Jones played some more stand-up role. But I think those are guys that, you know, not necessarily, you may have had on the card that could step in and be guys that could really help you here. You know, I mean, Dylan Carpenter is another one as well. I mean, if you've creeped on his
Seat at the
Instagram,
table.
right? I mean, like, Stewie, I mean, bring up an Instagram for us. As Cody Boudreaux with a $10. I mean, like, this cat looks way different than what he looked like at Santa Mall. I mean,
Good for him.
looks like, I mean, he kind of got some like Chase Pittman vibes.
They got the little Joey Bosa vibes.
I mean,
Somebody on Twitter said LSU's been due for a Bosa
yes, that's
variant.
what I'm saying.
they have.
They have. Chase Pittman.
Yeah.
Like, same
Pittman was a
sort of
dog.
Same scenario.
05 roster.
But when you look at, I mean, I'm just looking at the height and weights of what you're trying to put at defensive line, and that's where you still probably get a little bit of, if you have one position where you feel a little bit nervous, I don't know how much you can coach up size and strength because, like, obviously you get essentially 2 defensive line coaches. So for all intents and purposes, what you're going to see defensively this year from LSU has to be better. Like, you had to call in a 85-year-old Pete Jenkins in week 3 to come be your defensive line coach, and now you have Kevin Peoples. You bring in you bring in Coach Davis. Like, now you have people at the position where you can get it coached up, but I'm still looking at it, and after you get past Jacoby and Guillory at 320, like, you're looking at some of the people that you were just mentioning that might move inside, like Parrish Shands at 275, Gabe Relaford's a freshman at 260. Like, you're light on the defensive line.
I hope they don't move Relaford inside.
No, I don't think they will either, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just looking for names.
Yeah.
And, like, even the guys that you mentioned, like, Dylan Carpenter's 255. So I'm just wondering where they're going to get that kind of interior help from the defensive line, because you can only coach it up so much. But I do think it will be better from the top down. Like, even having Corey Raymond, I think you'll see better defensive back play where you're just at least on the same kind of – just get on the same page.
Yeah.
They got P.J. Woodland listed as the #1 corner, opposite Ashton Stamps, which –
that's what it was during spring.
right. I mean, coming out of spring, I would go with the same too.
And they have Jawan Johnson listed at corner.
Well, he's listed at the
Star.
Which
I really
That's the spot
anticipate
for him.
J.K. Johnson
Yeah.
to be that guy at cornerback. You know, I mean, when you're talking about, you know, you got
Is Alexander coming off injury? Stamps coming back. Tiviano coming back.
I think Stamps is a starter.
yeah.
I think P.J. Woodland had a fantastic spring.
Well, he's the first one of the Raymond proteges that are coming in, where it feels like he's got like exactly this is the kind of his recruit where he knows how to use him, where everybody else isn't really in that Corey Raymond mold yet.
I agree. I agree, but I think that J.K. Johnson, even going into last season, was one of your top cornerbacks.
Yeah.
And to have him now,
Never got to see him.
I mean, he's healthy now, right? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, he practiced the whole spring.
yeah.
And from all the pictures I've seen of like the receiver group working out and things like that, he's always in those pictures. J.K. Johnson's with the receivers, with the corners, doing these off-season workouts, which is obviously a good sign to see that he's working for this next opportunity.
Like he's not held back at all.
No.
Because this is what the second Ohio State guy that you got. You never got to see Seven Banks, who
Third.
Right.
Third.
Now you got
have,
Jair Brown.
Jair
on the
Brown.
roster.
There's another guy.
they got bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, they've
in the
got nice
secondary.
pieces of depth. And I mean, we mentioned Jawan Johnson.
Right.
I mean, I think he's a freshman that's going to play.
Bernard Causey.
Yeah, I think Bernard Causey's another guy that gives you some quality there. I mean,
They got Michael Turner listed at corner too. They have wide receiver next to his name, but he's listed under the corners. And he's wearing number 21, so I would think that he's playing defensive back, not receiver.
yeah.
Probably one of the fastest kids in the state.
Yeah.
There
They've
you
got
go.
the bodies at DB.
Yeah, I mean, DB does not concern me as much as defensive line
Not at
does. I mean, I really
2 years
think-
ago.
Yeah, 2 years
Yeah.
ago. Even
were-
last year to
yeah.
a degree.
You
You know, I mean, when you lost J.K. Johnson,
Yeah.
I mean,
And you had to move Sage Ryan to corner.
right, that was a dire
Where's he
situation.
listed?
But now it feels like, you know, you're starting to get the cupboard back into some names and some guys that you trust that can play the position. And I am not as concerned with the defensive backfield as I am with defensive tackle going into the season. I mean, without when you step away from this, roster and look at it on paper, I mean, it's hard to ignore all of the standouts, all of the proven guys that you have on offense. I mean, the offense gives you enough confidence and security going into the season again, thinking that this is going to be a high-flying, point-scoring, put the pressure on the defense, play-calling offense because of just the weapons, the offensive line, and the type of players that they have. Defensively, like we said, I think that there's some low-hanging fruit that you can clear up early, making sure that players are in the right position, making sure players are knowing where they're supposed to be, making sure guys are in their rotation, and you've got some guys getting, and keeping people fresh. Can they improve on tackling? Can they do something well on defense would be my desire going in, right? Like, you don't have to be a top 30, top 35 defense, in my opinion.
50?
But if you can stay within the top 50 because you do something well, right? Like, I've always said that if you're not going to be dominant defensively, which we have had the privilege of watching consistently LSU play over the last 20 years, one thing they've done more consistent than not has played stellar defense. Now, over the last couple of years, that's dipped, but for the most part of this golden age run, LSU has been a defensive-minded, a defensive-branded program.
They didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Well, they did have a choice.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well,
They did. They had a lot of choices. They just
they had a lot of players.
they missed
Yeah,
them.
they did.
Yeah, they just
Jeez.
missed. Now it feels like that's what's happening with defense.
Yeah.
For as easy as the offense looks, and do not take it for granted, right? Like, I mean,
Please
anybody who's been around here for 10 plus years understands what you're looking at right now is, I mean, it's football Camelot. This is about as good as it gets offensively. Same thing we all watched defensively,
Right.
10, 15 years ago when they were just dominant on that side of the ball. But
Didn't have a pulse on
during
offense.
that time, I mean, they had us four. It seemed like on offense, but they didn't. I mean, they had big time players.
Yeah,
They
Leonard
just
Fournette.
they couldn't cross the. They couldn't move. They had no scheme. They had no plan. They had no leadership.
insert
They
Jack
had
Mashburn.
They had no direction. Right.
So
So
far removed from the days of the Jack Mashburns being your calling card on offense. Whenever that was your big adjustment,
we found something.
we found something. Counter.
And you got Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., DeRay Jenkins on the outside, but your calling card.
And
is
that it
Jack
wasn't even the
Mashburn.
worst of the LSU offenses you had to sit through in the defense. If it wasn't dominant, God knows where the football program would be. But now it does feel like a little bit of the other side of the coin where LSU has become kind of an offensive. Since 2019, I feel like that's more of what the.
Oh, that's
It's
what
been
they're. That's what
synonymous
they're.
with.
They got 2 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. I mean, like,
Wake me up.
they
Play
got-
offense over here, coach.
I mean, they've got multiple first round wide receivers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's they're about to have multiple first round offensive linemen. I mean, that's something that LSU that was a lost. You didn't even you couldn't even. That was a joke.
Something you couldn't fathom.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was
Lost
that was a punchline. But you turn on the draft and you'd see defensive tackles, defensive ends, DBs just falling off of the board from LSU.
Linebackers.
Now, I mean, you just
Find
the roles are reversed.
Yeah.
I mean, the script has been flipped. Right. On who LSU is.
And that's wild to say because you had 2 defensive linemen drafted in the second and
That's
third
right.
round last year.
That's right.
Well, that's
They
where
did not know where they were supposed to be.
Right.
I mean, in as veterans in a defense, those guys were as confused as anybody else because they didn't have a plan, man.
But-
They had.
And I think when you talk about the tackling, as far as like from a defensive back's perspective, I think if you have more of a plan and more of a kind of
you're
everybody
in the
on
right
the same
spot.
page, yeah, you
Right.
won't be in that on that island where it felt like Major Burns and Sage Ryan always were, where it's 1-on-1 at the second level, and dude, good luck.
Right.
You're
Right.
going to get exposed because
Right.
it's not a tackle that you're supposed to make 10 out of 10 times. And it was something that I feel like they got kind of hung out to dry on, where it's like, look, brother, we're just trying to stop people from scoring every time they touch the football. And now if you can have, like, maybe hit them at the first level and the second level, then
Right.
the cavalry comes. I feel like that's more of on brand for what you're seeing from those type of players. But last year, I mean, how many times was Major Bird's trying to come up and there's nobody behind you?
Yeah.
And they were untouched going into the second level, and it's like, there's 80.
Well, and they did things that
They were great on first and second
support
down.
good tackling bad.
Yeah.
They took terrible angles.
Yeah.
They did
They're out of
not
position.
They did not have good tackling form. I mean, when they would get there, they would try to run into you rather than wrapping you up and taking you to the ground. I mean, it was hard to watch. It was difficult to watch
It looked like a side of the football that wasn't coached up.
the unorganization of the LSU
Yeah,
defense.
they didn't have good gap integrity. They tackled horribly.
They were
It
4
was
yards
just-
off the ball, the defensive
Yeah,
line.
the
in the first
defensive
game.
line
It
didn't
was-
even know where they were at. Like week 10, the defensive line's lining up 3-4 yards off the ball. It's just like
Inexplicable
These are
Yeah.
things that can be fixed.
things. I mean, like,
There will be
and
some
really and
fireable
truly,
offenses.
Yes.
Also,
it is scary to think that if the bowl fallout does not happen,
Thank you,
Ooh.
Jacques.
I'm telling you, like,
we would have been
House is back.
in Matt House's house.
I mean, House
Chilling.
is back, and when you think about how bad they were unprepared last season, it is really. I mean, it cannot be explained how behind they were with a group that, when you step away from it, is going to have 5 draft picks. I mean, Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo were drafted off of last season's team. I'm confident that Harold Perkins is going to be drafted off of this year's team.
Jordan Jefferson.
I would say Jordan Jefferson was drafted
Greg
off of
Penn's
that
gonna
team.
get
I was
drafted.
going to say that Greg Penn, I'd imagine, is going to get drafted off of that defense.
Major Burns might even get drafted.
No.
Hey,
He could be
you could
a
have
I mean,
a
for
breakout
the sake
year.
of the argument,
yeah.
Let's-
But I'm just saying,
let's say.
I'll throw him in there.
you know, I mean, Parashan's going to get a chance
Yeah.
in a camp.
Sage Ryan's going to get a chance.
Sage
Braden
Ryan, from his
Swinson.
athleticism, will get a chance in a camp somewhere.
Swinson.
Braden Swinson will get a chance somewhere. Probably be a pro. I mean, you ask people who know football, and they're like, "How was it that bad?" Like, not saying it should be a top 10, 15 unit in the country, maybe even a top tier defense in the league, but still, to have that amount of pros and be in positions where you didn't even have guys on the
Felt like you didn't have 11 on the team.
in the television screen. Like, if you were watching them play, you could be watching on an 80-inch flat screen, and I mean, it was
ball.
just guys from Missouri. you're like, where's all the gold helmets at? Like, I mean, where is everybody? It's just people were not in the right position. I'm telling you, I believe I really believe this. I think it's hard. It's difficult to screw up the LSU defense as bad as they did last year. I mean, just by simply having a player like Perkins covers up a lot of the
brouhaha.
disorganization that you have, right? But they couldn't even put him in the right position.
And you had 3 pros on the defensive line.
I mean, it really is, and I
that
don't
was your
mean to.
worst-
I don't mean to. Look back and we all saw it was bad, and they've moved on. They've made the moves and the adjustments. It's just really, like, looking back, it's hard to fathom, to really believe how bad they were. They had players, they had guys.
Their best game was-
like they had dudes, they had guys that I guarantee you, if you would have called Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, like some of the big time players in college football, and say, "Hey, you want Harold Perkins, Mason Smith, and Mekhi Wingo?"
Yeah.
All
take 'em.
3 of those guys would have probably started on their team the next Saturday, and they all had top 10, top 15 defenses. I mean, it wasn't as if LSU was taking a butter knife to a gunfight. I mean, they were showing up with artillery. They had no idea where they were supposed to be.
It was a 12-year-old man in a gun.
Yeah, a knife. But their best game for LSU last year was the first game. And the defense got, like, markedly worse every game after that. I guess you could say you could throw in the Mississippi State game just because it felt like they were so – you want to talk about how disorganized LSU's defense was. Their offense was the exact same on Mississippi State's front where it's like, throw in the towel. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it's obviously totally different circumstances. But that was LSU's best game was their first game where you didn't think that the defense was really that big of an issue. Like, okay, you played up to your competition with Florida State, and then the offense comes out and just finds another gear kind of halfway through the year, and the defense just gets markedly worse. And now you have wholesale changes, and that's what I keep saying, like, they had the players last year. It feels like you don't have that same amount of weapons going in defensive line-wise, but the biggest changes you made were defensive line, new defensive coordinator, new defensive backs coach. Like, you can only say so much for what they're going to be able to have to coach up because you can't bring in the recruits with you this early. Like, you're not going to have the arsenal that they want, and I think it'll be better. Obviously, you don't make those changes without intending it to be better, but I think in 3 years you'll be looking at an LSU defense you're like, that's what I'm used to seeing. Like, where you can finally marry, I mean, if you look into the future, like a Bryce Underwood with an LSU defense led by Blake Baker, Corey Raymond.
I mean, LSU defense at its...
I think people still think of it a little bit where it's synonymous with defense.
I think so too. I mean, I think it's, you know, because it was so dominant for so long that it, you know, I mean, that was the feel. I think that the new age crowd of college football probably recognizes and brands LSU as an offensive school, but LSU defensively at its best is deep defensive line, 1-star edge rusher that, you know,
flashes.
Right, just gives you a threat off the edge, whoever it is. Everybody from Marcus Spears to Kiki Mingo to Arden Key to hopefully Gabe Relaford. Right? But interior, a rotation of 5 to 7 guys that you can put in at any point of the game and get just as good as production, right? I mean, I understand that you have your top tier guys, but the 4th and 5th guys on the rotation, there shouldn't be that significant of a fall off of just holding the point of attack, just being able to compete up front. And then you've got free-flowing linebackers behind that defensive line that should be playing without any trash on them because the defensive line's keeping those guys off of the second level who can just roam. Think Kevin Minner, Harold Perkins, right? Guys that can go get you 20 tackles on a Saturday if needed. And then you roll out some of the freakiest athletes in college football from LSU's defensive backfield that 9 out of 10 times are from Louisiana. It's a lot like the running back room. I mean, name me the last dominant running back that came in from outside of the state. You know, all of these guys are from Louisiana. Same thing with DB. Now, you may have to go over and grab Jamal Adams from Dallas, right? But that's just because Hootie Jones at Neville said, I want to go to Bama.
I'd take Jamal every time.
10 out of 10 times you would, looking back on it. But in the middle of it, you know, I mean.
Take the Louisiana kid.
Yeah, you wanted Hootie Jones. Yeah, like I'm saying, you can go over and grab Grant Delpit, right, where he turns out to be the Thorpe Award winner.
Grant Delpit's from New Orleans.
He is a New Orleans kid, but, I mean, he still went to, you know, he went to Houston, went to IMG. But all of these guys routinely, Thurl Simon, Tyrann Mathieu, Eric Reed, Greedy Williams. I mean, we can do this all day. Corey Webster, right? I mean, like all these guys, Louisiana, you know, I mean, I give you the Travis Daniels once every 3-4 years, but it's not as if, like, you got to get Jabari Antoine back.
Yeah.
Like, you want to get this defense restored, the key is you got to keep Jabari Antoine, right? Like, you've got the right formula with Corey Raymond. You've got the guy in Peoples back there that helps. Now you got to get the players, and the players they're right here. Like, you got to go to Westgate. You got to get Jabari Antoine. You got to get that guy. Yeah. So, I mean, like, that's the key to it. We'll talk more about it. Remember, Daily, we're brought to you by Katie's Restaurant down in New Orleans. Online, katie'sinmidcity.com, located on Iberville Street, down in the heart of New Orleans. You can find them there, katie'sinmidcity.com. Great menu, cold beer, great service as well. Online, katie'sinmidcity.com. They have a sister restaurant in Francesca's, which is a sandwich deli that you can find all online at katie'sinmidcity.com. katie'sinmidcity.com is where you can find them. So, you know, I mean, I'm looking forward to this season, looking forward to seeing how they roll this defense out. I think that, you know, Blake Baker and Bo Davis are going to have to be creative, but I trust that they can.